Hello and good evening. Welcome to everyone who's here. I'm here to welcome all of you and provide some introductions. Our mayor, Doug Hutchison, is here. Would you stand? We also have, I think, State Senator Kevin Lumberg. Kevin, are you with us? We do have John Servette, Chief of Staff to Colorado State Senate President Brandon Schaefer. He's here. We also have John Stulp, who is the consultant to Governor Hickenlooper's cabinet concerning statewide water issues. I've known John for many, many years. Thank you for being here as well. Pam Shattuck is here, who is representing Senator Mark Udall. We have Donna Rice, who is a Loveland City Council member. Is Donna with us? Thank you, thank you. And I did meet Pete Findell, who is representing Congressman Cory Gardner. And Pete, I saw you here, so, oh, there you are. Yeah, thank you. We did have initially Randy Fisher and I think John Kafala's coming, but the snow has come down in Denver, and by the time they would get out, they would not be able to be here until we were about over. So unfortunately, they are not able to be with us. So thank all of you for being here. In addition, we have our special partners for this event, and they are Ray Caraway, who is the president of the Community Foundation of Northern Colorado. We have Jim Reedhead, who is the director of University Connections, and I know many of you are involved with University Connections. And we have Rick Miranda, who is the vice president and provost for Colorado State University. So welcome to all of you. We are delighted that you could be with us. In addition, we have had an organizing committee that has worked off and on, I think starting like August, September, from that time on, working on this forum. So would the members of the organizing committee please stand? You're here. Thank you. We appreciate you being here. And I'm Peggy Reeves, and my co-chair is Dave Edwards. So we are the co-chairs of the organizing committee. I would also like to just take a minute to thank all of the people who spent so much time on those displays that you saw out in the anteroom here. That was really quite nice of them to do that and provide a little additional information for all of us. I want to explain, before I just make a couple of remarks, that this is a three-part, I would call it, process, a forum. The first part of it is tonight, and we are certainly delighted you're here. This is considered the public forum/dialogue. Then there will be the opportunity in the second part for there to be 3 educational forums, educational sessions to be involved with, and they will also be located here. There'll be 3 of those, as I mentioned. And then the final part will be some public deliberation where we will have people who are there to help us to work through issues, and there will be 2 different sessions of those, one at Timberline Church and I think one at the Drake Center. So this is a 3-part series, and you are all here to be involved in the first part. So welcome to our community dialogue on water issues, basically focusing on the Poudre River. This is our opportunity to develop some common knowledge, some shared knowledge of the Poudre, and some common understandings. We can, as a group, raise the quality of the discussion around water, and we can do it in a positive and collaborative way, and that's our intent tonight. We know that water can be a divisive issue, no doubt about it, but this is our chance to listen to each other in a respectful way, sharing our insights with each other and working creatively together to forge our future. The Poudre River is our greatest natural asset in Fort Collins, and as you know, it's just a couple of blocks away. It deserves the best from all of us. I'm really excited that so many people showed up tonight. We normally have, at the university discussions, we normally have 100, 120, 150 people maybe. So our idea was initially to have this at shared tables But you can see with the number of people that are here, we thank you for coming, but we have to develop a little different format for tonight. So this is going to be an informal dialogue, we hope, about our very own Poudre River. This dialogue that will be both educational and productive. So once again, thank you. We're looking forward to input from all of you. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Rick Miranda again, who will make a few comments to all of us.
Well, thank you, Peggy. Well, I must say that overwhelmed by the response tonight. I had really no idea that it would be such a great turnout and a packed room in one of the largest venues in the city for such a thing. It's great to be here. And we couldn't be more delighted to be one of the three conveners of tonight's forum, together with our partners at the Community Foundation and University Connections, to open up this three-part series, as Peggy indicated, on the Poudre River and the future of northern Colorado's water. Just from the perspective of the university, we've long been closely associated with both the Poudre River and the city, of course. And it is very fitting that we're here tonight and as we try to engage the community in a meaningful conversation about our water's future. The history with the Poudre River and Colorado State University and in general water resources really goes back to the very beginning of the university. Ever since we opened our doors 141 years ago or so, our faculty have been conducting research on the Poudre River, and hundreds, thousands really, of students over the years have learned their disciplines using the Poudre River as their laboratory. I might mention some famous names among our faculty that you all might resonate with. Ralph Parshall, Elwood Mead, Louis Carpenter. They're all CSU researchers who made major contributions to the world's understanding of water resources, both the theoretical science side and the practical applications as well. I think Dr. Parshall's name is probably the most famous around the world. He's recognized by many because he invented what's called the Parshall flume, long used as a primary measuring device for agricultural ditch water. And that one device has made a major influence on the equitable distribution and proper management of irrigation water around the world for over 100 years. And it's not only the technological and science part of water and resources that CSU has been involved in. Professors like Evan Vlachos and Dave Freeman, they've conducted research in the sociological aspects of how we interface with each other and with the issues around water. How do people in a civil society resolve conflicts that involve different values over resources like water? This is a fundamental question. If we all had exactly the same values about all of these issues, life would be a lot easier, but we don't. And we recognize that, and we want to recognize that in a respectful way and try to come to some solutions to issues which respect that. And that requires not only science, but going beyond the science to talk about how we interact with each other. And that's the issue before us now and before us tonight, and the purpose of tonight's activities. And we look forward to engaging with the citizens of Fort Collins again here at the university. And we have our Colorado Water Institute is in the thick of the issue around the state and throughout really the whole western U.S. And our Center for Public Deliberations will be involved as well. They're pioneering methods to improve the way we talk to each other, the way we do democracy, so to speak. And it's fitting that these two CSU units are in close collaboration in this effort with our partners, the University Connections and the Community Foundation of Northern Colorado, to share their expertise here as well. So with that, I'm going to turn the program over to Dr. Reagan Wascom. He's the director of our Colorado Water Institute, and I look forward to engaging with all of you as we look forward to our water future here tonight. So thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you to everyone who is involved in putting this program on, as Peggy said. Reagan?
Thanks, Rick. Thanks so much, Rick, Peggy, Jim, Ray. Thank you all. Appreciate it. I'd like to invite my panel to come up and join me on the stage. Give me some support here, guys. Hey, good evening, everyone. This is remarkable to see all of you in the very back of the room. I think there's still some more seats if you want to come on up and give it a try. Sit down. It's really wonderful to see so many personal friends, so many friends of Fort Collins, friends of the Cache La Poudre here this evening. Thank you for coming. What we're going to do is, there's 5 of us, and we've been challenged to talk each no more than 10 minutes, which, if you know university types, that's going to be, we'll see if we can pull it off or not. But each of us has a role that we're going to do tonight. So our purpose, as Peggy said, was really to begin a process that would lead us to a community dialogue. We want to hear from a variety of voices, first from the panel up here tonight, and then to your voices, to your individual and your collective thoughts about this river, our watershed, our place here in Fort Collins. Now, Camp Collins was located here in 1862 because of the Poudre River. And in that sense, you could say that the river has always been at the heart of this community. The river is the key to our past, and I would say it's the key to our present and our future as well. And the organizers of this forum, they believe that this community, Fort Collins, should be engaged in a healthy and vigorous dialogue about what we want for the river. So my role tonight is to say a few words about the many present issues that this community is facing regarding the river. And then we'll hear very briefly from Mark Fiji on the history of the river. We'll hear from Heather Knight on the ecology of the river, Tom Moore on the economy in the river, and then Laura Pritchett on the spirit of the river, and then finally from you all. We'll open it up to hear from you as to your vision, your ideas, and thoughts about this community asset. So, to start my remarks with just a little bit of context, I think it's interesting that while the Poudre is really important to us, it's not a very significant river from a continental point of view. It's only about 126 miles long. It's really quite a small stream, but it flows across an amazing landscape from headwaters in Rocky Mountain National Park at 11,000 feet above sea level, down to where it meets the Platte below Greeley at 4,600 feet below sea level in farming country down there. So even though the Cache La Poudre doesn't have continental significance like the Platte or the Rio Grande or the Colorado River, did you know that the Poudre is Colorado's only designated wild and scenic river? It's also been designated as a National Heritage Area, the first of these areas to be so designated or established west of the Mississippi River. And these two designations, they recognize the unique and the significant contributions that this river has played in the development and the formation of Western water law, Western development, and in the ecology of this region as well. So I think it's important for us to context ourselves in this larger watershed. There's people, there's ecosystems, there's wildlife living above us and living below us as well. The Cache La Poudre drains an area of about 1,900 square miles in northern Colorado. And while in this community we think of it as our river, I would submit to you that the people in Rustic, the people in Poudre Park, Livermore, LaPorte, Timnath, Windsor, Greeley, they also think of it as their river as well. And we're not isolated from these other users. We're really in community with the folks in the Poudre River, the South Platte downstream, and actually with Front Range citizens to the south of us who own Poudre River water. City of Thornton, for example. Did you know that Thornton is the largest irrigator in northern Colorado? Someday in the not-too-distant future, Thornton will probably want its Poudre River water to fill taps in its great and growing city to the south of us. And I think this point underscores the fact that the fundamental pressure facing our river is urban growth. To satisfy future urban growth, it's estimated that Colorado is going to need another 500,000 to 800,000 acre-feet of water annually within the next 40 years. And that's just for the urban growth. That doesn't include the additional food needs, additional recreation, environmental needs, industries and activities we might not have even thought of yet we'll need water for. And much of that future water demand is going to be right here in the Front Range corridor, from Fort Collins south to Pueblo. And frankly, I would say that we haven't, as a society, decided whether or not we want to control that growth yet. Remains to be seen. So to put that 800,000 acre-feet of need in perspective for you, the total average naturalized or native flow of the Poudre River is about 275,000 acre-feet. So we need 2 or 3 more Poudre Rivers. To meet future demands, a series of water supply projects are underway or in the permitting process or under discussion. And in our community, Halligan, Seaman, and Glade reservoirs are certainly the most prominent locally, but there's other projects under consideration as well. And we may get around to talking about some of those tonight. But if you add climate variability and drought, really the inevitable occurrence of drought, on top of these growth pressures, it really, I think, becomes clear that we, the citizens, the community of northern Colorado, we're going to have some hard choices to make. Okay, so what would you choose? You want local agriculture? Would you like the health of the ecosystem? How about recreation? A thriving economy and a good job base? Local beer? What are you willing to give up and keep? There's simply not enough water in this stream to satisfy all of the desires. So I think in this context, it's important for Fort Collins citizens to recognize right now that a little over half, about 53% of our current treated municipal water supply is trans-basin water from other rivers. Water from the Colorado River via the CBT project and the Grand Ditch, the Larimer River via the Larimer Tunnel, North Platte via the Michigan Ditch. We reach into these basins every day to extract the water that we need and that we use here in Fort Collins. And our predecessors, they planned, they financed, they built the system that we enjoy today. And that planning and that building takes a lot of forethought. And I guess in a sense, you could say that what we're doing today in planning and preserving and building, we're doing that for future generations as well. I also believe it's important for Fort Collins citizens to recognize that the Fort Collins water utility is just one of 4 water providers here in our community, the so-called tri-districts. Fort Collins, Loveland, East Larimer County, the North Weld County water districts. They currently serve about 25% of the residents in our growth management area, and they actually serve about 55% of that land area. And we expect that those districts will serve a great deal of the future growth in this community. Did you know there's also 25 different agricultural ditch and reservoir companies that are diverting water from the Poudre? So to allocate, to share, to protect this water, we have to cooperate. And when you think about it, it's really amazing how well the system works. But we also know that we're going to have to do somewhat better in the future. Now, not surprisingly, there's no easy solutions for meeting that projected future water need. The best thinking is that a whole portfolio of ideas are going to have to come forward, and those include water conservation, water reuse, water efficiency, smart growth and redevelopment where we lighten our water and energy footprint. We're going to dry up some irrigated land. There will be purchase of irrigated rights, but we also think maybe we'll use some alternative methods like water banking, like alternative ag transfers that keep some water in agriculture, keep a local food base. And then also, inevitably, there's going to be some new infrastructure, some new storage, some new pipeline projects will be part of that whole portfolio that we need here in Colorado and here in the community to meet future demand. I would say in our climate, it's drought, particularly prolonged multi-year drought that makes water management and planning so difficult for us. And temporary restrictions on our landscapes and our stored and our excess water, that's how we get through drought. But if you obligate those coping mechanisms to new growth and taps, how do you survive that inevitable multi-year drought? It's not the first year that's bad, it's the second and the third year that causes us so much trouble. So even if we're willing to sacrifice local agriculture in order to get through drought and to manage growth, we're still going to have a place to put that water. And in fact, the city of Fort Collins, the expansion of Halligan Reservoir is really the city trying to firm up its drought supply for those years when we know we won't have enough water. I think there's a lot of good news, a lot of reasons to be optimistic in this community. We have a renewable water resource. Unlike other places in Colorado, it's the snow comes every year and the river runs. We have a resilient system. It's extremely well managed by our utility, and obviously we have citizens that care about this river and this place, and that's fantastic. There's a number of other water issues and Poudre River issues in front of us. Maybe we'll talk about those tonight. I hope so. We have to grapple with them as a community. I would say how we manage our floodplain, how we protect water quality, particularly in relationship to wastewater and stormwater discharges, how we protect in-stream flow needs, the health of our watershed, our river ecosystem. What do we want that downtown river corridor to look like? And then finally, how do we serve as leaders for northern Colorado in resolving and working through these issues? And so tonight we hope to start these discussions. But before we do that, I think it's always wise to context our present with the past. How did we get here? How did we get into this situation, Mark? And so to do that, let me introduce my colleague, Dr. Mark Fiji, historian at Colorado State University. Mark.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about history. And to start, I would say that it's impossible to tell the history of the Poudre River or any other river in 10 minutes. So rather than explain the history of the river, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about history and how history might be useful to us as we confront the challenges of the present and the future. In a lot of ways, I think that history is intrinsic to the very nature of flowing water and people's interaction with it. There's something about the nature of water and its flow, the rhythms of the river, how people interact with rivers that inclines them toward an historical perspective. People want to measure the river, they want to keep records on it, they want to keep records and sustain memories of precedents. They also fuse their own personal identities, which of course are fashioned over time out of their experience with rivers. So there is something about water and people's interactions with it that predisposes them to an historical perspective. It's built into it. I don't think it's any accident that we're in here talking about water and not grass or timber or minerals or animals or some other kind of resource. We're talking about water. And as I've interacted with people in the water community, I've noticed that they have, I would say, a natural affinity, quite literally a natural affinity for history. So history does matter. History serves various functions, and I hope it's important, and it's important to keep this in mind. History is a compilation of useful facts. For some people, it's also how they take those useful facts and organize them into meaningful stories about the past. And a lot of times they enlist those stories, those fact-based stories, in service of their various political positions. And I think that's inherent to the whole process, that's inherent to the politics of water, is how people think about the past and how they use that to validate in many ways their own political perspectives. But I think history serves other functions as well, and I think it's worthwhile taking a moment to think about this. History is a tool with which to think about the burdens and responsibilities that the past imposes on the present. I think if each one of us could do this, we'd go back into the past. We'd rewind the tape, so to speak, and we'd make the past different. We'd make the past different so we could have a different and better present. But we can't do that. The past gives us things. It gives us a burden of things, of past decisions and past events that we can't change. And it's our responsibility to honestly accept those burdens and confront them and deal with them. We have to take responsibility for the past. And I think that requires a measure of humility, and it requires an appreciation for the irony and tragedy that are intrinsic to the human condition. And I think it also requires a willingness on everyone's part to examine critically one's own cherished assumptions and values and what you think about the past. The past is really complex. I doubt if there's one person in this valley who can recite chapter and verse every feature of the Poudre River's history. There's too much there. So if you want to understand current water conditions and the challenges we face today and in the future, I think it's incumbent on all of us to become permanent, ongoing students of history. I love saying that. I'm a history professor, so I have to sort of tell everybody history really matters. And I would like to add also that in addition to the other water traditions at my institution, Colorado State University, there is something of a tradition of water historians, believe it or not. This goes back at least as far as the 1940s, and an historian named Robert Dunbar. And then Dunbar's legacy has been picked up by various people in history and government, now political science. It was picked up by my colleague Dan Tyler, and in some ways, I'm now the inheritor of that role. I'm the prophet of water history, I guess. So it's also important to keep in mind, I think, that history enables us, an understanding of history enables us to not be imprisoned by the past. It imposes a burden on us and a responsibility, but it doesn't put us in chains. It doesn't trap us. Knowing the past enables us to see possibilities and opportunities and different ways of thinking. We can go back in the past and see how people did things back then, and we can say, our circumstances are different today. Today isn't exactly like back then, but maybe there was something they were doing back then that could be useful to us today. The way they're thinking, the way they were talking, we can take that and we can restate it. We can revive it for the circumstances that we face today. So although it imposes a burden on us, we can't change the past. We can't rewind the tape. I wish we could, but we can't. We got to accept what the past has delivered to us. It's a burden and a responsibility, but that doesn't mean that it traps or imprisons us. We can find possibilities, opportunities, examples that can be useful to us in the present. We might use those things to construct a better present and a better future. So there's different instructive examples that might help us think about the Poudre River and its history. So here's more substantive historical content, and I'll come down off cloud 9 in the more theoretical perspectives on history and talk about some more concrete features of the river's history. But as I was preparing for this talk, I was reading as much as I could on the river and trying to wrap my mind around its complexity. And one of the things that I noticed is that the river's history is very conflicted. It's conflicted over who gets the water, where, and when. It's conflicted over how that water is going to be diverted or how that water is going to be kept in the stream. But if you look, and that's very typical of Western rivers. It's very typical of Western American water history in general. But if you look at each of those examples of conflict, buried within each one is an alternate possibility of cooperation and compromise and an attempt to form a rough consensus upon which enough people can agree to move into the future. And so I think you can do that. You can engage in this exercise with most events in the Poudre River's history. And it would be worthwhile, as you read about the Poudre River's history and think about it, is to look for those moments, look for those turning points in the past when people tried to turn away from conflict, when they realized that the answer was not in complete self-interest and individualism, but somehow there was a collective, a community good that was embedded in the resolution of problems, and they worked together to try to solve those. I think you can see that even in that very early instance when the Greeley and Fort Collins irrigators came into conflict over the stream. This was the 1870s, early 1870s, and the Greeley irrigators had established Greeley Colony, Union Colony, and they'd made the first diversions from the river. Upstream at Fort Collins, subsequent to that, some other irrigators diverted some water. And it was a real dry summer, 1874, and the Greeley irrigators came upstream to Fort Collins, and they saw those nice, newer Fort Collins canals flowing full, maybe even wasting some of that water. And that was the beginning of this conflict. They had a meeting in a schoolhouse between the two towns. They tried to work it out. They never did completely solve it at that moment. The weather turned wet. And the Fort Collins irrigators agreed to let some water flow downstream to the people at Greeley. But what stimulated them to try to resolve the problems even further is when some developers began to divert water, or plan to divert water upstream from Fort Collins. And then the Fort Collins irrigators were very interested in prior appropriation, who had made the diversions earlier than that. And it's a long and complicated story beyond that, but it did lead to the first efforts to systematize, to establish prior appropriation as the basis of water distribution in the state, and also to systematize the administration of the state's water resources. But I think you can find stories like that in many other events. You can find it in the system of water exchanges, which are an amazing story on the Poudre River, the development of the Colorado Big Thompson Project, the establishment of the Wild and Scenic River on the river. And so it's important, I think, to look for instances in the past when people could break through the conflict and find some means to cooperate with one another to solve problems. So finally, I think it's important to keep in mind that the decisions we make today are going to affect the future. We're still in history, we're still in the flow of history, and whatever we decide to do today is going to it's going to impose a burden and a responsibility on the people in the future. And it's going to do that in ways that we probably can't entirely predict or know. Thank you. Now we'll hear from Heather Knight.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening. It's good to be here. Ecology. Ecology is rooted in the Greek word oikos, meaning house. Today, that means the relationship between organisms and their surroundings, including plants, animals, soil, water, and us. Unlike many of you, I'm a newcomer to northern Colorado, but like most of you, I call the Poudre watershed home. On any day, newcomer, old-timer, visitor, teacher, scientist, rancher, recreationist, farmer, logger, and urban dweller, all alike can marvel in the richness and abundance that nature offers us. For the natural world welcomes us all. Perhaps one finds this gift of our place when gliding on newborn snow, weaving through fir and pine, listening to the chattering of chickadees and jays, following the tracks of snowshoe hare or elk. Or it's in the feeling that comes while picnicking under the trembling golden aspen, with wildflowers turning crimson and brass, and bighorn sheep rattling the rocky slopes above. Or perhaps it comes during the crescendo of the June rise, the booming falls widening the river's sides, working the banks for the new shoots to come, while the water ouzel dips and darts after hatchlings and the beavers slap in time. Or maybe it's the quiet viewer who steps from under a berry-laden juniper to test their luck at a deep pool. They're hazed by a cloud of buzzing bugs, and yet they wait for a glimpse of a brilliant rainbow trout. It is this sense of being unbounded by nature that awakens our senses and rejuvenates our souls. But a watershed is more than a sum of such parts. It's a combination of richness, abundance, and healthy function. For a river deplete of fresh, big flows, replaced by more low flows, means aging willow, birch, and alder, plus increasing potential for weedy species with big thirsts. Likewise, a river lacking correctly timed and measured new sediment means fewer spaces for insects, fish, and plants. Too much sediment means smothering and loss of habitat. The right kind of fire can work to clean and rejuvenate prairies, shrublands, and forests. The wrong kind can sterilize and start mudslides. Similarly, grazers and browsers, well managed, can prune, plant, aerate, and fertilize. building soils to filter spring thaws and slow summer storms, rather than exposing soils and causing erosion. I fear we have underestimated and taken for granted the complexity of nature and the challenge of managing our natural resources well. Often we quickly seek to lay blame and to identify causes and effects, and then draw from the hip for a fast solution. A solution that often acts to band-aid the scraped surface rather than healing a deeper fracture. Take, for example, leakage from 100-year-old earthen irrigation ditches. One response might be to seal and line all ditches to conserve water. The keen observer, however, might discover that wetlands and riparian areas have been enhanced and even created by such leaky waterways. Further investigation might reveal that these habitats are now home for special species, many of which might be sensitive or rare, and might even mention, in the case of Preble's meadow jumping mouse, now listed federally as threatened. This is just the beginning of one story which tells me we may require deeper knowledge, wider conversations, and creative problem solving to arrive at longer-term solutions that benefit more rather than less. There is no denying we live and love this special place. It's gathered us here together tonight. Our lives are enriched with great memories and marked by cherished times shared on the Poudre. But we have become more urban. Our relationship to our watershed has become one of visitor rather than steward. We are now more a part than of a part of this landscape. Hence, we fall into the danger, as Aldo Leopold said, of supposing breakfast comes from the grocery and heat from the furnace, and I would add, water from the faucet. We've begun to forget that our natural world provides our life force and determines our health and our future. Although resilient, we've forgotten that nature has real-time limits. We can choose to gadget and technically patch the symptoms of degradation, but at what cost? And for how long will that temporary repair work? As our good friend Dave Leatherman reminds us, nature always bats last. We ask a lot of the Poudre. Quench our growing thirst with endless, clean, fresh water. Irrigate our gardens and our fields and provide us with abundant, healthy food. And give us safe playscapes with plentiful wildflowers and wildlife to enjoy. Perhaps it's time to ponder how much more we can ask of the Poudre and how to work together to balance all our community's needs. I'm hopeful we can do this, for we are not an ordinary community, and nor is this an ordinary place. In the past, we've shown great vision by setting aside places for the next generations and giving ourselves time to come together where all voices can be heard and engaged in the design of our collective future. Perhaps it's once again time to step forward, ask the hard questions, commit to our obligations and to each other for the health of the land. Do we want to mark our time and name our new places for things that once were? Or do we want to know and be known for a legacy where all generations can drink water that flows through soils and rocks rather than concrete and culvert? For those willing to continue to see, listen, and feel our land, nature is sending us warning signs to read and act upon. If we so choose, we can come together and restore our watershed's health and consequently have a home for healthy human communities, sustainable working agricultural communities, and rich wildlands. My husband, I think, said it well. Should we be bold and quit asking what the Poudre can do for us and start asking what we can do for the Poudre? Thank you. And now we'll hear from Tom Moore.
Thank you. I think it was just a beautiful description of the river, and I'm here to talk about more of the economy of it. And I'm not going to bore you with a lot of dollars and cents facts, I want to just point out how the river works for all of us. It's truly a working river. I'm honored to been asked here to be one of the initial presenters. Fortunately, I have a long history here. I had two great-grandfathers come here in the late 1800s and settle, and I had the good fortune of raising my three children here also. I look at wonder with the hydrological cycle. I think of the snow on our mountains being a short time ago in an ocean, and I'm just always in awe of that. And the Poudre River is the one that brings us to us for many, many different uses. I'm going to just sort of recite some of those uses now. I've been fortunate enough to see rivers that form some of the great cultures, like the Nile and the Pharaohs, or the Urubamba just recently in Peru that nurtured the Incas. But while the Poudre is much smaller in size, it works just as hard, and the effect on its people is much the same. A river provides with agricultural and industrial opportunities and the playground for all our recreational activities. While the Poudre is much smaller than those rivers, it just works that much harder. This thing is certainly not a couch potato. The Poudre River is a truly working river, and I'd like to list some of its accomplishments. In 1882, the first municipal water plant was built and supplied drinking water and fire protection for the city of Fort Collins, a hugely important thing in the pioneer days. The nearest and dearest use of it to my heart is the irrigation. The use of water from the Poudre helped it make this the great agricultural area it is. And I'd like to point out a few facts of the management of the river that makes this somewhat difficult. First of all, let's remember we receive about 15 inches of water, of rainwater here. Our crops need about 30 inches to prosper. You can do dryland farming, that is farming without supplemental water, but mostly that's wheat. Our crops of vegetables, beans, beets, sugar beets, alfalfa, corn, all require irrigation. I think another fact that makes it difficult to manage a river is it's a bit variable, to say the least. In the last 25 years, we've seen one year where it produced 700,000 acre-feet of water, and another year where it produced under 50,000 acre-feet of water. That's a difference of 14 times, and I don't even think airline tickets vary that much. But recently, 90% of the water from the Poudre was used for irrigation. That's, I understand, has slid down to about 85% now as more population has come along and land use has changed. Just as a little side note, I had the privilege of working with water supply and storage for a lot of years, and its legendary president, Harvey Johnson. Harvey was a farmer, but for many years the mayor of the city of Fort Collins. And he realized how important a consistent supply of water was, and he pulled together a group that consisted of CSU engineering professors, water lawyers, and farmers to ensure that Fort Collins would have a strong supply of water. So it's good to see everybody pulling here together to look at those same sort of issues. When water supply and storage started out in 1890, the river was already fully appropriated, and one of the original founders of the company said we had families to feed, good land, so we went to the mountains and got the water we needed to make the land productive. You've heard how much water comes into here from the other side of the mountain, but those old timers really went up and did an amazing job, and those projects are still productive today. As much as I love farming, the fact is the water is worth far more when run through a city tap than used to irrigate crops. Today you can sell a acre-foot of water for about $10,000 an acre-foot to a city. You'd be probably pretty hard-pressed to have an agricultural value of a third or half of that, probably far close to the third, for using the water and keeping the water in agriculture. Industry and manufacturing was not a big thing here. We had a small sawmill and a grain milling for the pioneers that the Poudre River helped. Today, it cools rawhide through the innovative use of wastewater. And the quality of our water has brought businesses, though, such as the brewing business, that is really here because of the quality of the water. Also, I don't know how many of you know, but a lot of dairies have started in Larimer and Weld County, mostly because of the quality of the water we have. And of course, there's the recreation and the quality of life that it's just hard to put a dollar value on that. The ability to go up on the river and enjoy it for fishing and picnicking, or just take your dog for a walk by Lee Martinez Park. And who could imagine our city without the trees and the parklands that make it green and so beautiful? So in a quick conclusion, I'd just like to say I think we've all seen the news that we can expect 5 million more people to come to Colorado, either by, I've seen 2035 or 2050, depending on what source. Regardless about how you feel about growth, I have no doubt it will happen. I've seen the population triple here in the time that I've been here. We're blessed to live in a wonderful place where there are rarely floods, tornadoes, and really the hot and cold weather is limited to a few weeks here and there. And I wrote this on Saturday when I was sitting on my back porch. Lucky us, though. So we've all come and stayed here because of the beauty of the place, and much of it's attributable to the Poudre River. But I've never heard of anybody calling in advance and talking to the water board and saying, gee, will you guys have enough water to supply me and my next 5 generations if I move there? So while other people don't ask that question before they come, I think it behooves us to ask that question and listen to every idea and point of view, because we can all agree that the Poudre is our town's greatest resource. Thank you again to the people who put this forum together. And now we'll hear from Laura quickly.
Can you hear me in the back? Okay. I think tonight I was supposed to talk about the spirit of the Poudre River, which I hope to do, but please don't think that's a frou-frou, mushy, touchy-feely sort of approach, because I'm actually hoping to do something a little bit different. I'm not even going to quote any poets, although there are many, many wonderful poems about the river. I'm here to do something different, and I just wanted to start by asking, just think to yourself, I wonder how many of you had to cross the Poudre River in order to get here this evening. I crossed it 3 times to get here, and I also passed by Vern's, and I want to start my remarks with talking about Vern's restaurant in LaPorte. I like stopping by Vern's a lot, not just for their cinnamon rolls, but because the place is a bit of an ecotone, and that's a biologist's term for a place where different species mix and meet. And that's why I like Vern's, because outside you've got Subarus and you've got pickup trucks, you've got cowboy boots inside, and you've got chacos. And over coffee, you'll hear lots of talk about politics and music and hobbies and hopes for the future. So Vern's is a place where a lot of heated arguments take place, and I've been in my share of them. Perhaps the biggest cultural debate I've been a part of is that of the rancher-environmentalist divide, or the perceived divide. I was raised on a small ranch, and I considered myself to be part of the agricultural community. But I also consider myself an environmentalist, as, and I quote Webster's in this definition, any person who works to protect air, water, animals, plants, and other natural resources. And in the end, I found that there wasn't much of a divide after all. Ranchers wanted healthy land and often knew how to achieve it, and environmentalists were able to bring their own tools to the table. So many friendships were formed. And after being part of that debate for many years, one of the absolute most helpful and useful concepts that I came away with was that of what's called the radical center. The radical center is a term, to my knowledge, that came out of that debate and which is now growing in popularity and use. The radical center means a place where there's a meeting ground where diverse parties come to discuss their interests instead of arguing their positions. It's a term that has arisen from the conviction that extremes on both sides are not sustainable and not helpful, and that the two sides become more consumed with winning the argument than in finding solutions. This river debate has 2 poles, or perceived poles, at least in my opinion. There's no use in ignoring that or pretending it doesn't exist. As I see it, and this is probably oversimplified and artificially bifurcated, but there are 2 loosely grouped opposing groups, and I would say that it is the environmentalists versus the development interests, with many farmers caught in the middle. But in truth, as with all issues, it is far, far more complicated than that, than the two different poles. There are not just two poles. When I walk into Verns, I see farmers, recreationists, fly fishermen, rafters, families, tubers, kayakers, hikers, bird watchers, hunters. But mostly, I think, there are people who might not call themselves any of those things, but they want to show up at the Poudre River and have it look healthy. They also want to turn on their tap water and have it run, and they also want their local stores to have local food. But they want that water to be used wisely, and I think that they're willing to make some sacrifices so that the river and the tap water can run. And so there are a lot of diverse groups at Verns and here and elsewhere, and rightly so, I think that they should argue for their beliefs. I think it's good to have opinions and to fight for the things you believe in. I'm not opposed to strong feelings. In fact, in the end, I sort of wonder what we have in life if it's not but strong feelings. Strong feelings are what move us forward, and argument can be good. In fact, I wish more people had the amount of time and energy it takes to really engage, because good fighting takes a lot of work. Often unpaid, in my case. So those who know me know that I have opinions about the river and the river's future, and that I have not always been calm about them. So it would be naive for me to say that there doesn't need to be a versus or the different poles in this river discussion. There probably does. But in the end, and this I guess is my main point, the fact is it is always easier to dig in your heels rather than to find a solution. So I mean to continue fighting, but in light of that radical center, to work towards solutions that help the Poudre River and the citizens of Colorado. And is there one solution? I don't think so. What we need is a portfolio of solutions that take into consideration what I've heard Jim Reedhead call the triple bottom line: environmental sustainability, economic health, and social equity. When I look at a portfolio of solutions, they probably include conservation, water sharing between ag, cities, and businesses, ag to urban transfers, and possibly surface storage. There are lots of facts and figures out there pertaining to these options, and these are good. They help guide us. These facts and figures are important, and a lot of thought and work and smarts have gone into them, and I respect them very much. But one thing that has not had a seat at this table, so to speak, and which has not historically had a seat at the table, are the ways that we appreciate the river other than a commodity. We all know that the river has other values, but I don't think this always goes into discussions. And I simply wonder, I pose the question, whether or not if we can bring those into discussions, that we can help achieve that radical center. We all know and love this river. I don't think I need to say anything about the power of rivers on the human psyche, or the need to have a meaningful engagement with the natural world. I don't need to say how much kids need nature, how much we all need it, or the aesthetics of the sound of running water. There are lots of poems and quotes and lots of beautiful words written about water, and I'm a fan of reading them. I read them all, everything I can get my hands on. So I think it's already in us, at least I hope so, our acknowledgement that a river has inherent worth. So I'm curious about this. How do we take that tapestry of heart and soul and meld it into public policy? Besides talking about transfers, storage, and ditches, we also need creative ideas. If you ask me, some solutions that value that river might be to bolster Colorado's in-stream flow program, which would keep more water in the river. It would also maybe include having people being able to donate water to rivers, just like we can donate land for open space. And I also think that water boards should be facilitators in a deliberative process, sort of a grassroots process with a dialogue in the community about what should be done. So these are all things to think about, and it's essential that we do so, because we have to envision, and then we can fight. And when we fight, I hope we can fight in the radical center. That's what this forum is about, I think, to help us frame this discussion broadly, to bring up conceptual tools. that help people think about their river and envision the future so that we can find that radical center and work there. I think, unfortunately, that it is probably in human nature to want to bifurcate. It takes a conscious decision to resist. And that is why I hope, perhaps naively, that we can end the polarized debates and find a success story for the Poudre River. I have a birthday coming next week. It's an important birthday. And it has me thinking if I've learned anything on my time on Earth, and I probably have not. But it has got me thinking about maturity. It seems to me that maturity is a lot about hard work and responsibilities. It's not just that, but it does seem that's a lot of it. But true adulthood is also a wider view of the world. We are encouraged in this society to create lives of security, normalcy, material comfort. But beyond that, I really hope that we are encouraged to live in a world that is psychologically sustaining, socially responsible, and environmentally sound. In the West, what does that mean to be mature in terms of water? It means we are currently making or about to make decisions about water and land that can either honor that triple bottom line and be responsible, or they can be very, very ruinous to both communities and land. And I hope as we go forward that we can be mature. The state of Colorado owns the Poudre River, so ultimately the citizens of Colorado own the Poudre River. But what does that mean? And I can't get through, I'm a writer, so I can't get through without quoting one poet. I'm going to quote the great William Stafford. He said, "The greatest ownership of all is to look around and understand." So I want to say that again. The greatest ownership of all is to look around and understand. So when we look at this river and all the complex uses, I think a starting point is to try to understand not only very complex things like ag-urban transfers, but also to make sure that our conversation addresses our passions and loves, emotions, dreams, and our soul's stirrings. And from there, to find some common ground and start talking. Thank you.
Thank you, panel. So we've set the table for you all, for your deliberation and discussion. We'll stay up here as long as you all behave yourselves well. But I'm going to turn the program over now to our facilitators, Martine Carcassonne and Mary Lou Smith and Leah Sprain. They're going to come up and we're going to begin the dialogue. We're not going to take a break. We figured let's just keep her going. If you need a break, still some food and drink out there. Go ahead and help yourself and let the discussion begin. Thanks, Martine.
So I'm Martine Carcassonne. I'm a communications studies professor at CSU and the director of the CSU Center for Public Deliberation. The CPD is an organization I started 5 years ago just to serve as an impartial resource for the Northern Colorado community to help improve the quality of our communication about tough issues and to help us kind of work together with those. So I have a few comments here that kept me at about 4 minutes instead of 10, so we'll be quick and then the rest of the meeting is yours, we promise. So a lot of my research is focused on how do we deal with complex issues and how do we figure out better ways to talk to each other about that. And clearly, as we've seen today, water is a very difficult issue and one that's every day becoming more and more important for us to figure out how to talk about it productively and deal with it. Water is a very technical issue. It has scientific, legal, environmental, ecological, agricultural, and economic aspects. The public sometimes can struggle with dealing with really highly technical issues. But water is also about values, as we've heard a lot about today, and it's essential for the public to engage that part. Experts can't make the decisions about values for us, the public have to, and that's why we need to engage this issue broadly. Issues like this, as we've seen, have multiple competing underlining values that require us to make some tough choices and to get creative and to accept some difficult trade-offs. We make better decisions if we really understand those underlying values and we really understand each other and we figure out ways of doing the difficult work that communities need to do to work through those issues. I had kind of a party here that I was going to walk through all the relevant values, but we've done that already. So we've all heard the values that, I would argue that everyone's pro-river, right? Someone might have values above the river, but we all value the river. We all value the environment and open space and local farms and a local food economy and our agricultural heritage. We value freedom and the freedom to choose where we live. We value living in a great community. The trade-off is other people want to live here too. Many of us value the ready and generally inexpensive flow of water, whether that's for our houses, our lawns, or our farms, or our great breweries. The rub, of course, is that we can't have it all. The simultaneous pursuit of those values leads to incompatibilities, and again, forces us to make choices. In the literature, the planning literature, they call these wicked problems. Wicked problems are problems that have no technical solution. The scientists can help us a lot, but they can't solve it for us. It has inherent value paradoxes in there that we have to deal with. And acting on any part of the problem just creates other problems. So there's no solution, there's no stopping point, but we can treat the problem better, we can work together, but it's going to be a constant process. So that's what we're trying to start today with this three-part process that Peggy talked about. The overall project is aimed to take on this problem more collaboratively and productively. Wicked problems require high-quality communication to deal with. We can't just continue to talk past each other. We're hoping that we can work towards perhaps a shared vision and figuring out those steps to kind of start working towards that shared vision. So tonight is the starting point, and we're going to turn it over to you in about a minute. One of the first steps in really dealing with a wicked problem, like the little blue forms that you have in front of you, is to get a broad sense of the shared concerns, the points of common ground, and the key differences we have to work through. We need to develop shared understanding of those. So probably the most important thing you're going to do for the next hour is listen to each other while you're also sharing your own opinions as we go through. So as you walked in or on your seat, you should have got one of the green forms as you're going through. We hope that most of y'all take some time today to kind of fill some of this out as much as you can, answering some of those prompts. Here in a minute when we turn it over to you, we've got about 300 people and we've got an hour. So we're going to ask some of y'all to share maybe one or two of these statements just to start getting a sense of this. What we'll be doing is we'll type up all these blue forms. We'll also, as you're speaking, be capturing the conversation as you go. And that will help us, both everyone else kind of see all the broad range of opinions out there, but also help the committee work on both the public education aspect, the second stage, which let's go through some of those tough issues that we need to understand to build a base of understanding. And then when we do the forums in April, we'll have more interaction. And what we hear tonight from all of you and what we hear on the website moving forward will help us frame that issue and figure out a way to make it as productive as possible. If you've ever been to a meeting run by the Center for Public Deliberation, I typically show up with a small army of students, and I split everyone up into small groups, and we face each other in a circle and talk through. As Peggy said, because of the numbers wanting to come tonight, I couldn't do that. Makes me a little nervous handing a microphone to someone in front of 300 people on a contentious issue. And we have a set of ground rules, and we'll add to them if we need to. But we do also have confidence. I know the group that put this together really has a vision of, Fort Collins is such a great community. Can we become an example to the nation, especially to the West, on how a community could really take on a tough issue and understand the competing values and work together to make good decisions and keep this community great? So to help us kind of try to pull this off, we've got a set of ground rules. We see it posted sometimes that we're going to walk through here to govern ourselves. First is to be honest and respectful. And we do mean both sides of that. Civility doesn't mean sugarcoating things and just saying what people want to hear. So we need you to be honest, but you can do that in a way that's respectful. One way to think about that, it's okay to fight. Let's just fight fair tonight. Second, listen to understand. And that's not natural for us. We normally listen to kind of find flaws or listen to attack or listen for someone to take a breath so we can start talking. Tonight, really try to listen and try to figure out what are the values that are underneath everyone's assumptions. Third, assume good intentions just for the next hour. Let's just assume the best of all of us, that we all have something that we truly care about that we're here tonight to talk about. Fourth, it's okay to disagree, but do so with curiosity, not hostility. We need, part of this process is to figure out those differences and those disagreements and start understanding them. But let's deal with our actual differences, not perceived differences, not caricatures of each other. So those first four will help us hopefully uncover those concerns, the points of common ground, and key differences. And then lastly, be brief. Again, we have 300 people in about an hour, so we just want kind of brief statements we'll go through. I have students on each side. We're actually not going to use the microphone stands if we can avoid it. We'd rather everyone sit down instead of having a line of 20 people. So some of the students will raise their hands. They're on the side. So some of them are spotters, and then some of them have the microphones, and they'll kind of pass it around. So we're saying kind of 30 seconds max for each of you. We'd like you as much as possible to complete one of these sentences, one of these prompts. We don't think it constrains you too much because it's a pretty broad set of questions that you can kind of play off of that. And the last point, we'll identify some of these differences. We won't have time to work through them. We won't have time to go back and forth tonight, but we'll identify those, and then at the interactive sessions in April, we'll be able to do a lot more of that work of really kind of talking through and working through this. And then my final point will be, clearly those that have a strong opinion on this, we'll hear from you tonight, but we do also ask those in the audience, and the wonderful speakers set this up so well, that if you're one of those struggling, that one of those in the radical middle, we need to hear from you tonight as well, so you can be part of that conversation, your voice is heard. With that, the students are ready to go, and it's your turn.
I would like to make sure that as we go through this discussion as a community, we keep in mind that when we talk about growth and biological systems, there is no biological system that says grow or die. Secondly, I'd like to talk about storage of water, and to keep in mind that in our recent history with Horsetooth Reservoir, that early in the 2000s, the biggest reservoir in northern Colorado was offline for 2 or 3 years. We managed to get through that time period by making very modest changes in the way we live. Lastly, I have to get rid of the no limits idea. We've been talking about moving water from all over different storage watersheds. From the Yukon, I've heard while I've been here, from Lake Superior, from the Flaming Gorge, and cutting down all the trees to preserve ranch land and farmland. But the kind of growth that we're talking about would eat all that farmland anyway. So how much farmland would we eat? And that has to be a part of this discussion. Thank you.
We have someone on this side.
Hi, I'm Rick Ingalls, retired hydrologist, and one of the things that I'm sure we'll all be talking about in the future is efficiencies, trying to get the best use out of water, and as mentioned in the panel about treating it as a commodity, but also as the value of the river system as it comes out of the mountains and across the plains, as Fort Collins is right here in a transition zone from cold water, clear mountain water to the plains, warm water fisheries, and so forth. And many of us know that the state has declared it impaired waters through the water quality and stuff like that. But one of the efficiencies I'd like to see considered is the urban use of water through our taps gets recycled. It comes out the pipes through the treatment and back into the river, and it probably somebody else has water rights on it. But that water from the upstream edge of the city is a cold water fisheries. The downstream edge, there's about 80–90% of the urban diversion is put back into the river, but it's warm. It's treated for all the water quality, but it's warm. And it begins the warm water fisheries right at the outlets of the treatment plants. And I would really like to see that bigger innovative ideas on reuse of that water back to its original source, the value here being mountain water, and in this transition zone here in the city be effectively put back to its original use. So
thank you very much. What I'm hearing is that reuse is something that you consider very important, and we have that here. Thank you very much. Yes.
Yes, I'm Wayne Klima, retired professor from CSU. I wanted to interject an idea here, and that is that we talk about the shortage of water, but the idea is that in an irrigated valley, there is a popular concept that you can't save water because of the return flow that goes to the river. This concept is an erroneous concept because that water mostly evaporates or turns saline before it reaches the river. And therefore that requirement is a legal requirement that caused farmers then to waste the water that they could ordinarily save and transfer to other uses. And I've looked at that carefully in a number of instances and gathered data on it. And so it's just a long-standing erroneous concept, and you can save water. And since irrigation typically runs as low as 25% in efficiency, you could have efficiencies at 80 or 90 or even 100%.
Thank you so much. Dr. Klima has pointed out the controversy between how much of the water that agriculture uses can be conserved for other uses and how much cannot be. And it is actually a debate that is certainly not decided, but here's some words you might keep in mind: consumptive use and return flows. We'll be talking about that some in our educational sessions that will be coming up.
And certainly, figuring out some of those technical aspects and thinking about possible ways for efficiency is going to be an important part moving forward. And we want as many ideas as possible because dealing with these tensions is about creativity. But we also want to hear not just from the experts tonight, we want to hear from the public to talk about what's important to you and those type of things as well, right?
Dr. Beard, I think, needs the microphone here.
You can go ahead and step up to this microphone since you're right in the middle.
Yeah.
I've been on the Universe City River Committee since we all began. We've heard a lot of things about the river. One thing I've noticed is we've been told that the water is used 6 times over before it reaches Nebraska, and that's return flow they're talking about. What I'm wondering about, what happens when we have a major rainstorm, a major snow on the eastern side, and the river is running very high and there's absolutely no way to capture that before it reaches Nebraska? And if we do recapture it, what happens to or we take that high flow away to build the storage facilities, what happens to our riparian areas?
Thank you.
Question.
We've got that recorded. Next, who are we seeing back here?
You got a microphone coming up behind you.
Hi, pardon the mathematical sense here, but I'm just going to read straight off my page. It seems we have a problem present, and obviously we need a solution. So, in my opinion, to get to a compromise for all, it seems to make sense to capture as many data points of the river and all who use it and how they use it. There's a maximum average annual flow to the river. This means a maximum square footage of farmlands can be used or a maximum population can be reached, etc. Once determining numbers of such, you can use them. As well, one town cannot consume all of the river. We must determine a percentage or a ratio that we share with towns to flow on the river, and an area can use to define how much we can or cannot use within our annual volume should be another percentage defined. From these numbers, I believe we can define percentages we can allocate to the causes we all agree are important to us. So the basic premise is if we just start defining how big the river is and how much of it we want to use, we should be able to say, a certain percentage goes to farmland, a certain percentage goes to recreation, and a certain percentage goes towards development, and you end up with a finite scale.
Thank you.
And you did write that all down, right?
Yeah, we've got it. The Australians are having some very interesting policy changes, some major changes in water policy based on the concept of having a specified portion that goes first to the environment. So it goes very much along some of your thinking. Next idea?
I guess I'm next. I'm Lynn Hull. I'm a local artist, so I'm not thinking so much about the mathematical statistics on the water and the water quantity. I think that we have one of the fine characteristics of our city, and part of our identity is our river. And to have a natural river with as much wildlife habitat as it has, right, a few blocks from right downtown is really a miracle. When I hear about developing the river or taking water out of the river, I think, how could we give up this incredible environmental heritage that we have here? So my greatest fear is that we would lose that wildlife habitat, that access to nature 2 blocks from downtown. We have this natural river. We do not have an urban sewer like San Antonio was at one point. It would not be appropriate to develop the river for commercial use along its banks. I think we need to be really clear and figure out how we can make this accessible to humans, but not as an urban construction. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Rich Shannon. I suspect you're going to do this, but I'll request it in the event it's not there. In the education session that's coming up, I believe the second session, is it possible to get a position paper developed and out in advance that explains the ag to urban transfer concept? It has been discussed for decades. On its surface, it seems so reasonable, and yet it hasn't happened other than in sort of a scorched earth approach of Aurora and the Arkansas River. We're yet to see whether Thornton's approach will leave the farms in Weld County and Larimer County in a scorched earth fashion. But if there are good examples, can we see them in advance? And if there are not, can we at least get a good position paper to understand the merits and the difficulties so that the creativity that it's being called on from this group will know what the basic starting point is?
Very good question. Many of you know Rich Shannon was for many years with the city of Fort Collins I first knew him when he was on staff, and I was on the city water board, and his point is very good. In our educational sessions, we will be providing materials for people to understand the facts and the trade-offs and the issues related to things like ag to urban water transfers. Another topic will be conservation. What is the city's water conservation plan, and what happens to water once it's conserved? And then some of those other questions about, yes, we may want to have the habitat remain on the river. What are the trade-offs? What does that mean in terms of how many people can live here? And if that means fewer people, how do we manage growth? So all of those issues will be issues that we'll be presenting and talking about in those educational sessions.
And 2 of the prompts are I need more information about. One question I have is, so certainly that information which you can give us to tonight. We also have it set up on the Community Foundation website that other people can kind of fill out. That will help us decide what content do we fill the educational sessions, and then what background information do we need before the deliberative forums.
All right.
Yeah.
My name is Joe Peisman, and I sit on the Natural Resources Advisory Board. And more importantly, I fish in town, sometimes limited success, but a lot of us value the. And my big concerns are the wild fluctuation in flows that we see. Sometimes the June rise high flows are just followed by the flows coming through town. And my real question is who that controls and manages the river and makes decisions about water flows takes into account the in-town fishery.
Okay, we have that down, and we will be covering that in the educational sessions. Next.
Okay.
Good evening. Thanks for putting this on. My name is Glenn Colton, and My biggest concern is that we're ignoring the root cause issue of the water problem, as well as many of the other problems that we have both in Colorado and in the United States. And that is the idea that we can have exponential population growth in a country and world with limited resources. And what I want to really do is get back to where we can have a discussion as a community, as a state, and a nation as to how many people we want in our country, how many we can sustain environmentally, economically, socially. And I'm afraid that we just go after all the symptoms without getting at the root cause of many, many of the issues that we are facing as a country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Lou. My name is Bill Emsley. My comment is, we talked about this a little earlier. It has to do with values. If we can, at the beginning of this series, somehow capture our values in regard to the river, in regard to water use and how it would impact our development, our quality of life. Those values, I think, if we can come up with a set that we have reasonable agreement on, from those values, I think then we can develop plans, policies, and move forward in a way that I think all of us can accept. But without that set of values, somebody mentioned it earlier, not having those common values to start with, we really don't know where we're going. So I think that ought to be part of the equation.
Thank you.
And certainly that's part of what we're asking tonight, right? What are those
what
values?
Are some of those
what
values?
are the most important ones from you?
Yeah. Right here.
My name's Dave Justice. I'm not a big professional. I'm a carpenter, just work on my own. But I want to talk about the values. And one thing I look to in Colorado are free-flowing rivers, and rivers that will sustain a healthy population of trout, populations of wildlife, the native wildlife, the plants. I mean, if I heard the mathematician talking about, dividing up the pieces of the pie. Well, unfortunately, when you start doing it, there's all the pie's all gone many times over. But value-wise, a free-flowing river is a lot different than a reservoir that's sitting out somewhere, containing the water. It's a live thing, and there's just no comparison between the two. So that's what I would say. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is George Wallace, and I'm on the County Agricultural Advisory Board. And we recently have been giving a good deal of thought to the importance of the agricultural water that is rented back from the city of Fort Collins to agriculture, and the implications of reductions or in that arrangement. We've prepared some materials that we'd be happy to share during the next sessions that talk about those implications. And also we've identified some potential partnerships that we think are worth discussing as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Doug Ryan. Decisions are currently made about the river on an individual sort of ad hoc basis when a proponent comes and puts a project forward. And I'm wondering what it would take to authorize the community or the whole basin to do a regional plan that would make some of those decisions rather than on an individual case-by-case decision by a user, and would therefore incorporate a wider view of values and visions.
Some of you may know about the Corps of Engineers is undertaking something called shared vision planning and attempting to bring a little bit of that into what's already a very regulated procedure by looking at Halligan, Seaman, and NISP together. But even that, as you know, is much further down the road than if we were to begin at the very beginning, and I think that's what you're talking about. Yes, sir.
I'm Ken Tharp from Fort Collins, just a curious and interested citizen, but I'm wondering how the recently completed three-state management plan of the Platte River Basin that Dr. David Freeman has reported on, how will that affect us? How can we integrate our plans with them? Secondly, I would be interested in learning how agricultural uses conservation can be made more efficient. should there be public support or public loans to agricultural people for cementing the irrigation ditches or other ways of making irrigation more efficient? Finally, is it still the case that about 85% of our water is used for agriculture and 15% for municipal?
Yeah, we don't want to get, we don't want to get too much into Q&A because there's no experts that can answer those questions. That's a pretty simple statistic. Is that still about true, Reagan? Or
85 is a good number.
Okay. Yeah, so 85 for agriculture, he's saying is still. Yeah. Well, let me go here, and then you can go next.
My name is John Henry Peck. I've lived here about 28 years. I've got a varied background, and I've finally decided as an old guy that I'm a citizen of the world. And I love the conversation that's tonight. I think it's a start of something big. But I'm a little bit concerned when we talk about our river. Who are we? I mean, I love that river dearly, and everybody else does. I love Colorado dearly, and I could see why people want to come here, but I'm a little bit, I love our nation. I've served our nation's military, as has my dad and my brother, and I'd give my life for the country today. What I'm saying, though, I'm also aware that we're living in a world, and the river belongs to the whole world, but we are the stewards of that river. We need to make the decisions, but not just what is good for us. I don't want Colorado or Fort Collins to be a gated community of 200,000 people. I think we need to always keep in mind that we are all in one earth. And I can use religious terms because I'm an ordained minister, but I'm also very new agey, and I believe we're all related to life, and the coyotes are my brother, and the trees are my brother, and the river is my sister and mother and all those. All I'm saying is, whenever we think of the river, let's do what, I love every presentation, but let's remember that there's a whole world, and we're part of that world.
Very, very good point. I would like to point out, too, that some of our friends from toward Greeley, when they heard that we were having this forum and we were calling it the future of Northern Colorado's water, they said, well, why didn't you invite us? And we had to point out that we are convening as the city of Fort Collins to look at our water future, but we have to be aware that our water future is more than just our water future. We share that water with the entire northern Colorado, and as this gentleman says, we're really sharing with an even wider universe than that.
I'm Gina Jeanette, and the thing that I'd like to say is that we have an incredibly complicated water law system in Colorado, probably the most complicated in the whole country. We got to this place with legislation, with court suits, and all kinds of fighting. But I think we have to be not fear modifying our water law and improving them for the future. And specifically, historically beneficial use of the river or of water used to mean agriculture, domestic, or industrial. Over the last few decades, we've pushed that to also include beneficial use as including recreational use. I would like to see us push to modify it to include environmental use as a beneficial use. Additionally, I think that we also have to improve it in the terms of the rule that says use it or lose it. That rule alone discourages conservation and efficiency. I believe the system needs to provide an economic benefit, particularly for farmers who improve their water efficiency. And I believe that cities should be willing to pay agriculture for those efficiencies in order for the cities and the farms to share the water to make it go farther. And these are the kind of things that I think will help us stop the fighting, but we have to be willing to change the laws.
Okay, I'm Tim Anderson, and
I practiced dentistry in Fort Collins for about 28 years, and I also fished the Poudre, so I want to extend what he started, and also Dr. Beard. When the Poudre looks like a good river, it fishes like a good river. And when it's a ooze, it fishes terribly. You'd swear there was no fish in it. And so there's got to be a creative solution to get minimum stream flow from the Ted's Place on down, because a lot of us urban anglers don't want to drive up the river. So I think we should study a way to fix that by sending less water down, as Dr. Beard says, during rains and runoff, and even it out. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ginny Doft, and I'm just an ecologist. I love, like you love, the river, the water. I think what we need to do, all of us, is to turn the tap off as soon as we can, as often as we can. Turn it off. Before we brush our teeth, wash our hands, only use it when we have to. I think that would help some.
Good.
My name is Bob Comives, and we've been asked to be honest and respectful, but I can't find a way to be honest, actually. So with the tongue only halfway into my cheek, I'd suggest that we use the papal election approach, that we lock ourselves in the room and eat only bread and drink water until 90% of us agree on a solution. We could cancel the next meetings if we did so. And meanwhile, outside, all extra basin draws would be shut off. And maybe we'd come to a decision. But I really applaud this process, and I'm excited about the way it's begun. Thanks.
Thank you.
Maybe we can get that group to work on the NFL too. I was telling my students that instead of running small group discussions this time, you'll kind of act like Donahue. And of course they said, "Who's Donahue?"
I'm Aaron Million with Million Conservation Resource Group. I wanted to talk a little bit about what Reagan Wascom hit upon. The state's faced with a 500,000 to 800,000 acre foot shortfall over the next few decades. When you go around the horn in the state of Colorado, you have huge environmental issues occurring in Grand and Summit County because of the very small area where most of the transbasin diversions occur. You have continued dry up in the agricultural base on the Arkansas. You have the city of Sterling doing a $30 million reverse osmosis project because the degradation of the South Platte has gotten so severe on water quality. And then as you come back to the Poudre in this region, you have projects that have been proposed and projects in the future that are going to be proposed. I think one thing that the state, the region, and the community ought to look at is new water supplies to add to the flows of the Poudre rather than detract. We have proposed a project out of Flaming Gorge, out of the Green River system. The reservoir would stretch from Kremling to Dillon to Copper Mountain. It's an existing reservoir. The environmental issues have already been collapsed into the system, and a pipeline brought into the region that would support several 100,000 acre feet of new water to add flows to the region, the system, and enhance the quality of the riversheds and watersheds in the region in general. Plus add some huge hydropower alternative energy to the focus. Without question, conservation, in-stream flow program needs to be expanded. Unfortunately, the state is broke and doesn't have the money to support those real important programs at this point. But I think it's paramount that while there's been discussions of changing the water laws and looking at conservation, which again needs to be pushed to a maximum, that all the solutions on the table should be looked at. As Mr. Moore said, we need to be planning for 5 generations down the road, not just 2 years from now.
Thank you, Mr. Million. How about another person? Here we have my friend George, whose last name I cannot remember.
Reed. I'm George Reed. I'm emboldened by someone else who just stated a personal, kind of opinion. And I don't fish, but what I love, probably almost as much as anything else, is fresh tomatoes. To me, there is nothing like biting into or even slicing up a fresh tomato. And we grow a lot of our food, and we sell some. And I just, personally hope that that never goes away. I probably won't be around when a lot of this comes to fruition, but for future generations. So much of our food has lost that taste that comes from it being grown nearby. Thank you.
I'm John Colans, and I wanted to say that despite some of the comments before that I found somewhat encouraging, I think the forum focus is still decidedly too parochial, and that it's difficult to truly make the tough decisions that we have to make here about this important resource without fully understanding the decisions all up and down the Poudre, rather than just here in Fort Collins. And I think we run the risk of losing that fact, and I would invite the organizers to maybe in the future hold some of the forums up and down the watershed. We'd love to have you in Greeley. Okay. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
That's good. And we may have some of you come participate and perhaps help us lead some of our educational sessions as well.
I'm Rob Helmick, and I think for the educational sessions, it would be important for everyone to understand how mechanical the system is that the river is. It may be in a rock-lined channel, but it's a very manipulated system, and I think it's important to understand how manipulated the river already is to make those decisions.
I'm Frank McCrae, and the one thing, or 2 points I'd like to make in your educational piece. I think it's very important that the group understand the prior appropriations and what that does. And not all states have that, but most of them in the West do. But it allows water to flow to its highest and best use. The other thing that I would encourage you to do is to educate the group on in-stream flow. And probably the way the water, when used in agriculture, flows back to the river. Because I've heard some comments, and I think there's some misunderstanding on the way that works. And a very good study has been done by the University of Wyoming on the Star Valley. And what they found is that by irrigating, you stored the water in the soil. It returned to the river in about 3 months, and that provided the in-stream flow that you need for recreation, fisheries, and so forth. So agriculture does have a benefit to other parts of our irrigation system. But again, that prior appropriation and what it does, and the reason I think it's really important is because the federal government would like to control that. Right now it's controlled by state statute and our interstate compact on the upper and lower Colorado Basin.
The gentleman brings up a point that's very interesting in contrast to the point that was made that perhaps we need to make some changes in our law. The CSU water archives fundraiser called Water Tables will this year be talking about exactly this subject, and that is how prior appropriation has evolved and changed over the years to take advantage of the opportunity to look at beneficial uses we didn't think were considered beneficial, and the environment is one of them. So the point was made, we need to perhaps think about some changes in water law. The point is made here that we have something in prior appropriation that is a very good tool for us. We can learn from both of those perspectives. Others? Yes, sir.
I'd like to make kind of one general point. I'm probably like most people in this room, I have a wide range of values, from the ecology, I'm an avid outdoors person, to the economic development, because that's part of what, gives the city who we are. But I think I'm like a lot of people in the room in that I really don't know what the trade-offs are very well. And I'm hoping, what I'd like to see out of the educational sessions is a good quantitative as well as qualitative information that I could use to make a good decision, because I don't feel qualified at this point to really pass judgment on what the right thing to do is, because I simply don't know enough about the subject.
Very good point, and that's exactly why we decided that we need those 3 sessions, and even that won't be enough, but at least it's better than not having them. So thank you for pointing that out. Yes, sir.
I think the person missing here tonight is the river commissioner. He needs to be part of all of this discussion, or he can lead the discussion.
We do have the Division I Water Resources person here tonight, David Nettles, who is participating and listening. So good thinking.
My name is Mandy Zaitchuk. I'm a natural resource student at CSU. I think that this is awesome. I'm glad to be a part of like a community event, and I'm glad that we have a community that participates in something like this. I think that while we're coming up with ideas and solutions to this problem, one of the things that we need to keep in the back of our minds is other alternatives. Think about other alternatives such as urban agriculture and vertical farming, and to potentially get us just off of agriculture and or ranching in the West.
Hi, my name's Chris Fleming. I'm also a natural resource student at Colorado State. One of the main overarching concerns I have for this project is looking further than 40 years down the line. If this project does go through, I think we're just going to be setting ourselves up again for history to repeat itself. And we'll see our children, maybe our grandchildren, in the same room, maybe 4 times the size based on projections, going through the same things we do. So I would just like to invite everyone maybe to look further than past just 40 years down the line and create legislation, policy that really is truly sustainable, because as we see, a lot of legislation here in Colorado lasts forever.
Good point.
Good evening. My name is Carl Glazer, and my wife and I had the pleasure of going on the Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District tour of their facilities on the western slope. I would encourage anybody and everybody who has not gone on that tour to do so. It's quite educational. It's free, lovely bus ride with food provided. And they also have a tour of their eastern slope facilities, which my wife has done, but I have not. So she should be up here talking. But the point that I learned from that is that our predecessors really planned in advance so that all of us here could be here tonight. And it's incumbent on us to plan for the future. Certainly conserve our resources first and foremost, but plan and provide for future generations. I have 3 sons. I want to be able to have them afford to live in Fort Collins. Thank you.
Thank you.
We had another one in the back.
My name is Terry Rue, and I represent 3 generations of agriculture. The 4th and the 5th, unfortunately, have had to leave the area because we couldn't afford to continue our production agriculture operation in this area. And this is going to be a continuing problem. We all have to eat, and so some changes are going to be required in our area, much like the student talked about, more backyard gardens and that kind of things. And as we develop some low-density subdivisions and in the rural areas, we need to have some more education to help the people that are moving there to help have sustainable agriculture. And Larimer County's done some great jobs, but we need to continue on that line.
My name is Taylor Maggart, and I'm actually what I see part of the problem. I'm from the Western Slope, and I'm really disturbed by the need to support the influx of growth instead of kind of support the allowing people to live or encourage them to live where there is the water. Why do we need to pump water from the Western Slope to the Front Range over here? I mean, yes, I am part of the problem with that, and I don't see a solution to it, but I would like that to be part of the discussion.
Very good.
And certainly one of the aspects of wicked problems is trying to define the scope. You know, we certainly have some back and forth in the scope, both in terms of time and scope in terms of geography, and trying to find that right kind of scope to pick is going to be difficult moving forward.
Hi, I think it was mentioned earlier, but I'm just looking forward to, in the education standpoint, about learning more about the economics of water. It seems like the project that I believe it was Mr. Million was proposing seems like an incredibly large expenditure of resources, and yet at the same time, I feel like I'm not paying very much for water, so it seems like there's kind of a disconnect, and so I'd like to learn more about what water really costs and how those costs are made. So,
did you hear that, Mayor? He said he doesn't think. Okay. We do hope everyone is filling out as much as possible. At least, if everyone does at least one of those prompts, hopefully more than one, it'll give us a lot of good information, kind of moving forward as we plan these events.
We're going to have the students at the doors as you leave collecting these forms, and we would appreciate your turning them in. If you wanted to write more and you didn't have time tonight, you can go online to University Connections website, which is on your program, and you can complete it online as well. I think we will then give you information about the educational sessions now, and then the public deliberation, and then we'll close for the evening. The educational sessions will be from 5:30 to 7:30 on Thursday evenings here. We won't have food for those, so you'll need to have something to eat before you come, but we will have cookies and lemonade. As we said, we're going to try to make them as informative as possible to really help the public understand what the issues are. So we'll be working on those. If you want to sign up for them, if you would go online, again, at University Connections website, you'll see where to sign up for the educational sessions. You will be best off if you can come to all 3 of the educational sessions. And as we have the curriculum set for those, we probably will have that on the online as well. At this point, we haven't made those decisions because we were largely waiting to hear from you tonight before we made firm decisions of what the educational programs would be.
And then in April, we have 2 deliberative sessions set up unlike the educational sessions, those will both be the same thing. So you would only really need to come to one or the other. The dates on their agenda, I know one's a Monday night and one's going to be a Saturday afternoon, I believe, in April. The 11th and 16th is what's in my head, but something around there. But with those forums, those will be about 2.5, 3-hour forums in which you'll be, as much as possible, placed in a small group, and you'll be given some framing material that will help you walk through these choices. So we'll be developing the material through the educational information and through the information we gained tonight and on with the website. Mary Lou and I also worked with the Water Institute. They had a graduate course last semester on water conflict, so we worked with that class all semester to start thinking about how do you frame this issue and things like that, so we'll be able to use that type of information. But with that, you'll be working in small groups, talking to each other, walking through, really dealing with some of those trade-offs and thinking through that. I also have an electronic keypad system, so we'll be able to kind of jump back and forth from a small group session to a large group session as necessary to kind of get a sense of the overall group and start thinking about kind of steps moving forward and those type of things. Yeah.
Before I turn this over to our other co-chair of this committee to close, I would like to ask John Stolp to come forward and say a few words. Peggy Reeves, who I think most of you know is a former state senator, and we're so glad that she is still working very hard in our community. She mentioned that John Stolp is in Governor Hickenlooper's cabinet, but what I don't think most people know is this is the first time that we've had a water, specifically a water person, in the cabinet of the governor. And the intent is to really bring up the level of water. And so we're very, very proud to have John Stolp here with us tonight.
Well, with an introduction like that, I'm better off to just leave right now. So, no, thank you, Mary Lou. And Governor Hickenlooper, as he campaigned as a candidate, and then since the election and now after the inauguration, has been spending a lot of time in the country listening to communities and what the issues are, and the fact that he has a person in the governor's office to deal specifically with water, and also I serve as the IBCC director. And but the most important thing I do is listen to communities. And the governor has encouraged the ground-up approach on so many things, and water is one of those. And this is a great example of a community coming together to engage with each other and discuss what's good for their community and what's good for Colorado and even beyond our borders. And so thank you for the opportunity tonight to be here and to listen. I'll try to get back to some of the educational sessions that you have, and I encourage you to continue this great dialogue. And so thank you, Mary. Glad to be here tonight.
Hi, my name is Dave Edwards, and I'm pleased to serve with Peggy as co-chairs of the organizing committee. We're excited. When we embarked on this, frankly, we didn't know how it might turn out. And congratulations to all of you. A civil society requires civil discourse, and we've had that in spades tonight. Give yourselves a hand. As any of you know who have put something together, it takes a lot of work, and Chelsea DeFort is standing here at the door. The food, the chairs, the logistics, the mailings and everything don't just happen. So Chelsea, who works at the Community Foundation, thank you. Jim Reedhead here to my right, the Director of University Connections, has been hands-on with this, and then Jim was instrumental, along with the organizing committee, in putting together the panel. Please thank our panelists. I hope you, like me, felt they set a wonderful stage for the beginning of a community dialogue. I might also add that while I've seen some people leave, and certainly this was intended to start somewhere, and that meant here in Fort Collins regarding the Poudre River, but I saw in the crowd our neighbors and friends from Loveland, our neighbors and friends from Greeley, and parts in the whole drainage area. So we didn't mean to be exclusive, but we filled the room, standing room only, and who knows where we'll go from here. Thank you all for coming. Travel home safely, and we look forward to seeing you at the educational forums.